Hey, Best Rock, can you hand me some clippers?
Here you go.
There's two of them now? Wah! Welcome back to the Red Ones Go Fast. Old Big Mek here, and that's right, there are two of them, and we really got to break this down. Let's get into it. All right, so what exactly am I going on about? Well, 5 days ago on June 20th, 2024, Games Workshop announced a brand new balanced data slate for Warhammer 40k. Now, if you're not into the tournament scene or anything like that, you probably have no idea what this is. But basically, every once in a while, G-Dubs figures out that Warhammer 40k is kind of broken and they rebalance it. So things that are oppressively too good are knocked down a little bit, and things that are equally like really terrible, they bring up a little bit. They want everything to be kind of about the middle, and that's a good thing, right? You're trying to make sure the game is balanced, and it doesn't matter what army you choose, what units you bring, you have a pretty darn equal shot of the victory, so that it comes down to your individual tactics and not having some power combo based in the rules. Now, along with the balanced data slate, they do a Munitorium Field Manual, which is the points updates. That is generally how they balance things. Things that are really good go up in points, things that are really bad go down in points, and so that it kind of equals out. Sometimes, though, they do need more changes than that, and that's where you get the balanced data slate. They'll increase, the firepower of some weapons, or decrease things like the number of fate dice that the Eldari got, for example. Now, what made this new rules update so tricky is that they updated a bunch of core rules too. They had a core rules update and rules commentary, which used to be two separate documents, are now one document, and it really was extensive. In fact, I did a whole video on it on how it was pretty much edition 10.5, and then we really got into this new pivot rule, which we're talking about again. See, the problem is, along with the balanced data slate and the field manual and the core rules updates and the rules commentary all coming out at the same time, which changes the base state of the game. So it doesn't matter what you play, what mission, whether you're just, being a casual game at your friendly local game store with your buddy or going to an official tournament, it's the core rules of the game all got updated. At the same time, they released the next tournament mission packs for Pariah Nexus. So basically, since 10th edition launched with the Leviathan box in July of last year, we have been playing with the Leviathan mission pack. It was a pack of cards, has all the missions and stuff in it. In fact, this is them right here. When you bought this deck, it gives you everything you need to play games in the Leviathan setting. So you've got your different deployment cards and primary missions, secondary missions for both the attacker and the defender, as well as these gambits, which are things that don't exist anymore, different mission rules for the battlefield, and things like that, as well as your objective markers and whatnot. So this was the companion that you needed to play most missions in Warhammer 40k. Now, there is one base core mission that is not technically a Leviathan mission that's in the 10th edition core rulebook, and then there's been some missions published in White Dwarf, which is, of course, Games Workshop's monthly magazine. So there are multiple ways to get missions to play, but the big mission pack, the one all the tournaments have used, basically if you're playing any game that wasn't out of a White Dwarf or just the basic core rulebook, it was a Leviathan mission. Well, now we have Pariah Nexus. So Pariah Nexus is just like this. It's a whole stack of cards, a whole thing of rules with a rules pamphlet, just like this. And that will be the next season of Warhammer 40k, likely for the next 12 months, just like this had 12 months, which is pretty cool. Like, there's nothing wrong with that. What happened, though, is the Pariah Nexus tournament rules were already outdated because they were designed and printed before this balanced data slate, rules update, rules commentary, all of that. And they added in that rule called pivot to change how movement works in the core rules. Well, Pariah Nexus also now has to deal with pivot, and theirs is different. And that's what's causing all the confusion online. So how you get there is the Warhammer community webpage. You do downloads, Warhammer 40k, and then it brings you to here, and here's all of those downloads we've been talking about. So you can see here, these rules were updated on June 2nd. It's, UK version, so you've got day, month, then year. And these are all the ones that came out on June 20th. So the core rules, they have their own thing with the pivot right here. And here has been, this is the whole video I did on the pivot value was for this rule right here, which is that each time you pivot a model, rotate it any amount around its central axis. The first time you do this, you subtract the model's pivot value from the remaining distance it can move during that move. If there's not enough distance left to do this, it cannot pivot. Note that the distance it can move is only reduced once for the move, no matter how many times you pivot. It's not necessarily a bad rule. The problem comes in that pivot value you see on the bottom. Most models have a pivot value of 0. So you're like, okay, what's the point of having a pivot rule? Well, you see the exception there. Monster and vehicle models. So that means they absolutely have to have the keyword monster or vehicle, unless they're on a round base or an aircraft, have a pivot value of 2 inches unless otherwise stated. And that is hugely problematic. In fact, I did an entire video on it, which I will link up here right now. And if you're confused or you haven't seen it, you definitely should watch that. The super condensed short version of it is because the 2-inch reduction qualifier is specifically tied to non-round bases that have either a monster or a vehicle keyword, you end up with a bunch of random units that really probably weren't intended to have this pivot value have it, and a bunch of units that were probably intended to need the pivot value not have it because they don't have that particular keyword on their data card. Now here's where things get spicy. If you decided to download this instead and look at the Pariah Nexus mission pack, you would see that they have their own pivot rules right here. Core rules updates tournament play. So they want the most balanced experience for matched play. That would mean any official tournament, including the Grand Tournament and US Opens. And it has changed that second point, the ones that have the 2-inch reduction, to all models that are not on a round base, excluding aircraft models. So now you see why there's so much confusion online with people arguing with each other about which models have a pivot penalty and which models don't. It depends on which rule set you're looking at. Are you only looking at core rules? Because those rules will apply to this mission pack from Leviathan, or the basic mission in the rulebook, or any missions that are in any codexes or supplements or white dwarfs will all use the pivot value that is only applicable to vehicles or monsters. But if you buy the Pariah Nexus mission pack and you're playing with those missions, it's a completely different pivot value that is much more restrictive. It's every model that is not on a round base. So that means all of your bikes, all of your cavalry, so the Attilan Rough Riders and things like that, Squig Hog Boys for orcs, anything and everything that is not on a round base now has that 2-inch pivot value penalty, specifically playing Pariah Nexus missions. Now, is that a bad thing for tournament play? Probably not. It makes it a little bit more fair because then you don't have to worry about the keyword thing, but it also is very arbitrary. A small oval is not gaining that much with that pivot. In fact, here is your typical small oval that we're talking about here, right? And that is a legit Games Workshop base, as you can see. So this is your typical biker, cavalry. There's a bunch of Mechanicus units that use this oval base. Lots and lots of things. And the base itself is like 2 7/8 inches long by 1 3/4 wide. So if you were to deep strike this out onto the board sideways, and then when you make your charge, pivot it, and then charge in, what you're doing is you're moving about this central axis, and you're gaining the difference between halfway of the width and halfway of the length. All right, so again, we went over that. This is 2.875 inches long and 1.75 inches wide. So half of the 2.875 is 1.4375, and half of the 1.75 is 0.875. The difference between the 1.4 and the 0.8 is 0.5625. So this small base is going to gain just over a half an inch on the charge. Is that really going to make or break the difference in a game? I mean, in a competitive tournament, maybe. Is it worth losing 2 inches of movement over? Again, so this unit is getting penalized 2 inches of movement for gaining 0.56 inches on a pivot. Does that really seem fair and balanced to you? Now, obviously, the bigger the oval and the bigger the difference between that length and that width, the bigger of an advantage you're going to get by popping out on the board, doing that pivot, and then charging, right? The amount that you're gaining there is, getting to be significant. It's still less than 2 inches, though. And frankly, if what Games Workshop is worried about is people gaining distance on that charge after you've done like a deep strike or something like that, where you are 9 inches from an enemy, make it where you can't turn on a charge. Charge has to be in a straight line. That seems like it would be a much easier solve than completely mucking up absolutely everything with how movement works. And of course, the other major problem being these little guys. All of your hover tanks that use the round flying base, the flight stand, this is a base. It is even defined in the core rulebook as a model or a vehicle on a base. So yeah, the problem with this is in the rules, you measure from the hull or the base, whichever is closer. And well, as you see on this wave serpent here, the hull is always closer, but it doesn't have a penalty for the pivot. So what they're so worried about with units gaining an advantage on a charge after a deep strike, they've left out the units that are spamming that the hardest. Drukhari more than Eldari, but still, you plop in a raider that is, well, pretty significantly long, and then turn it and measure from the hull, you're going to have a big deal. I mean, this particular wave serpent is, let's see here, over 7 inches, and this one doesn't even have all the parts on it yet. That's just hull is over 7 inches, versus it's only less than 5 inches wide. So you are gaining a significant number of inches when you do pivot this unit and then charge in, measuring from the hull. So even what they're intending to fix, they're not fixing with this rule at all, let alone rules. Okay, remember, again, that's the whole big thing. 2 completely different rule sets. Are you talking about core rules, which are applicable to the base game, the Leviathan mission pack, anything in the rule book, or the White Dwarfs, or are you talking about Pariah Nexus rules, which are going to be all of the upcoming tournaments, including the Tacoma Open? And frankly, I think that's kind of the crux of the whole matter here. There's always been multiple ways to play Warhammer 40k, but it was usually very obvious which version you were playing. If you are playing Crusade, for example, and there's different Crusade rules, you know you're playing Crusade, right? You and your friend, or whoever you're playing, have specifically gone, hey, let's play a Crusade game, or a boarding actions game, right? That's completely different. Or Apocalypse is completely different. Heck, you could even argue Kill Team is a microcosm smaller version of 40k, right? But you know you're playing that different version. This comes down to you sit down to play a game, and it depends on which mission pack you're using as to what your base core rules are. And that is where all the confusion comes from. All right, that's going to do it for this video. I think we've beaten this horse to death enough now, but maybe everyone actually understands what the controversy is and why it's a big deal. We're not talking about people trying to spam the system. Well, maybe if you've got Drukhari Raiders, but again, it's not like it's this big aha got you. The rule's just written badly. But again, the big thing, the big controversy, what most of us are talking about is just the fact that there are 2 completely separate rule sets that were released on the same day in different documents. And so it depends on which version of the game you are playing as to which rule you need to know. And that is not that great. All right, let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. Are you still confused about anything? We could definitely hash this out, as well as any other rule that changed in all of these updates. Yeah, so let's talk about it down there or over at our Discord server, which, by the way, is free to join. Link in the description below. All right, that's going to do it for this one. So until next time, Wagon!